The world was never truly dark to Aaliyah. Darkness had been her companion since birth, but within that endless shade she had learned to feel light in ways others could not. Every footstep across the cracked pavement of her neighborhood spoke to her like a whisper, the sound of rushing wind between narrow alleyways painted images sharper than any photograph. For Aaliyah, silence was not emptiness, it was a canvas, and every sound, every vibration, every shift in air gave color to her world. At 16, she was small in frame yet carried herself with a poise that made strangers turn twice. Her long braids brushed across her shoulders as she walked, her white cane tapping gently against the ground in front of her. Some people pitied her, others dismissed her, but Aaliyah never asked for either. She had long ago accepted that sight was not her gift. Her gift was something else entirely, hidden, patient, waiting. School was the place where shadows felt heaviest. Corridors echoed with chatter, laughter, the metallic slam of lockers. For Aaliyah, each sound carved a map she could follow. She could tell who approached her by the rhythm of their footsteps, who carried irritation in the stiffness of their breathing, who smiled kindly by the lilt of their voice. But she could also hear the sneers, the whispers, sharp daggers aimed at the girl who could not see. "Watch out, blind girl's coming through. She probably doesn't even know what she's wearing. I bet she bumps into the wall again today." Their words bounced off tiled floors and cement walls, louder in her ears than they were meant to be. She never flinched, never answered. Aaliyah had discovered early that silence unsettled bullies more than any comeback. And yet, their cruelty lingered in her chest long after the voices had faded, like smoke from a fire that refused to die out. Still, she moved gracefully. Her cane tapped, a steady rhythm, a heartbeat guiding her forward. Each step was deliberate, composed, as if. She stumbled, she corrected with elegance. If she bumped into a shoulder, her apology was calm, unshaken. To the casual eye, she looked fragile. To the cruel eye, she looked like prey. Yet beneath her skin lived a different story. Every evening, when the world outside grew quiet, Aaliyah transformed. The basement of her uncle's house became her sanctuary, a small, dimly lit dojo lined with soft mats. Here she was no longer the blind girl. Here, she was a warrior. Her uncle, a man of few words but endless patience, had taught her since she was 9 years old. What began as therapy for balance had turned into mastery. She had earned her black belt not with sight but with relentless discipline, using sound, instinct, and an unbreakable will as her weapons. But no one at school knew. To them, she was simply Aaliyah, the quiet, blind girl who drifted through hallways like a shadow. On this particular morning, the air buzzed with an unusual tension. Aaliyah could hear it the moment she stepped through the school doors. The voices were sharper, the laughter meaner, like a storm waiting to break. She could tell from the way lockers slammed and sneakers scuffed against the floor that the bullies were already circling. Sure enough, before she reached her first class, the familiar Cruelty arrived. Well, well. Look who's here. It was Tanya, the ringleader, her voice syrupy sweet on the outside, venom on the inside. Blind Barbie, strutting down the hallway like she owns it. Her friends snickered. Aaliyah kept walking, her cane leading her gently forward. "Say, Aaliyah," Tanya continued, her footsteps clacking deliberately close, "do you even know your shoes don't match today?" The laughter erupted. Aaliyah's lips curved slightly, a smile so faint it almost wasn't there. She knew her shoes matched perfectly. She could feel textures, remember placement, organize her wardrobe with precision. What Tanya thought was a clever insult was nothing more than a shallow attempt at dominance. But still, the laughter rang out, cruel and heavy. Each note was meant to carve shame into her skin. Aaliyah's silence was her shield. She let them laugh. She let them think their words had power. What they didn't realize was that silence gave her clarity to listen to the tremble in Tanya's fake confidence, to hear the uncertainty masked behind giggles. For every word they spat, Aaliyah built a stronger fortress inside herself. She reached her classroom door at last, her hand brushing over the cool metal handle. Her cane folded neatly in her grasp, tucked away as she entered. The room quieted slightly, not out of respect, but out of curiosity. She had long grown used to the weight of eyes she could not see pressing against her back. But today, as she sat in her chair, Aaliyah felt something stir deep inside her chest. A subtle shift. The shadows in which she lived were no longer heavy with silence alone. They carried something else now, an echo of coming change, like the quiet before thunder splits the sky. Her fingers traced the edge of her desk, grounding her in the present. Her ears caught the faintest vibration of sneakers scraping the floor, Tanya and her crew settling nearby, their whispers beginning again. Aaliyah straightened her spine. They thought they knew her. They thought she was fragile. But the shadows that wrapped around her were not weakness. They were armor. The day would come when silence would no longer be her only answer. And when that day arrived, the bullies would learn that the girl they mocked was not a shadow to be laughed at but a storm they could never have prepared for. The hallways of Jefferson High were a battlefield disguised in fluorescent lighting and polished linoleum floors. Most students walked them without thinking, clutching books, slamming lockers, gossiping about trivial dramas. But for Aaliyah, every step was a test of awareness. She didn't need her eyes to know what was waiting, she could sense it in the air. Laughter lingered too long, conversations fell abruptly silent when she approached, and footsteps slowed to watch her pass. Her cane tapped lightly against the ground, each click a marker guiding her through the maze of lockers and bodies. She heard Tanya's voice before the girl even spoke, sharp and theatrical, as if she was performing for an audience. "Oh look! The Queen of the Dark has arrived," Tanya announced, her words dripping with cruel delight. The hallway erupted with laughter, students eager to align themselves with the loudest voice. Aaliyah didn't stop walking. She had learned long ago that hesitation fed the fire of mockery. Yet, Tanya was never content with silence. "Careful, Aaliyah," another voice chimed in, one of Tanya's friends. "Don't bump into the lockers again. We don't want to dent your cane." More laughter. It wasn't just sound, it was vibration, energy pressing against her like a swarm of gnats. Still, she kept her chin high, her steps calm, her cane a steady metronome. But Tanya wasn't finished. "Wait, wait. Everyone quiet. Let's see if she can even find her class without help." Suddenly, the hallway stilled. Aaliyah could feel the hush, could feel the way dozens of eyes turned toward her, their silence more suffocating than the noise. Tanya stepped closer, Aaliyah could hear the smug sway in her walk, the scrape of sneakers meant to taunt. "Here, let me help you," Tanya said mockingly, and before Aaliyah could shift, the girl's hand shoved her shoulder just enough to send her cane skittering to the ground. The hollow clatter echoed like gunfire. The hallway roared with laughter. Aaliyah's hand instinctively reached for the cane, her fingertips brushing the cool metal. But before she could pick it up, someone kicked it further down the hall. "Oops. Guess it slipped." Another voice snickered. Her heart clenched. Not from fear, she had trained her body to move without sight, to navigate even without her cane, but from the deliberate cruelty of it. The humiliation wasn't in losing her balance, it was in their performance, in their need to turn her existence into a show. Aaliyah knelt slowly, her hands sweeping gracefully along the tiles. To anyone watching, she appeared calm, almost detached, but inside she fought to hold her composure. Her uncle's voice rang in her memory, "Patience, child. Control is your greatest weapon. Let their laughter be your training ground." The hallway buzzed again as whispers circled. "She looks pathetic. Doesn't she get tired of it? She should just stay home." And then, Tanya's voice rose once more. "Careful, Aaliyah, you might crawl right into the wrong classroom. Maybe someone should put bells on us so you can hear when people move." Her entourage howled. Aaliyah found the tip of her cane at last. Fingers curling around it, she rose, not hurried, not flustered, but deliberate. Her spine straightened, her chin lifted. Though she couldn't see Tanya's smirk, she could feel it in the air, hot and cruel, like the sun burning against her skin. The urge to respond flared within her, sharp and dangerous. She imagined, just for a moment, what would happen if she released even a fraction of the discipline stored in her muscles. The crack of a wrist deflected, the thud of a body meeting the floor, the silence that would follow. But no. Not yet. Aaliyah inhaled deeply, centering herself. She tapped her cane against the floor, a sound louder this time, commanding attention. The laughter faltered for just a second, caught off guard by her poise. She tilted her head slightly, her voice calm but resonant. "I don't need bells to hear you, Tanya. You're loud enough already." The words weren't sharp, but they cut nonetheless. A ripple went through the hallway, some stifled laughs, a few gasps. For once, Tanya's rhythm stumbled. "Oh, please," Tanya scoffed quickly, covering the crack in her armor. "Don't act tough. You can't even see where you're walking." The laughter resumed, though thinner now, less certain. Aaliyah continued on her path, her cane leading her forward. Each step felt heavier, not from defeat, but from the burden of restraint. It would have been so easy to turn the hallway into her battlefield, to show them that blindness was not weakness but a sharpened blade. But her uncle's words guided her again, a true warrior chooses the time, not the crowd. When she finally entered her classroom, the noise of the hallway dulled behind her. She took her seat, breathing slowly until her heartbeat steadied. Her fingers brushed the edge of the desk, grounding herself in the present. But beneath her calm exterior, something had shifted. The cruelty was no longer just words to be endured. It had become a challenge, a test of who she was willing to be. And Aaliyah knew, deep down, that the storm she carried inside her would not remain silent forever. The laughter of the hallway still echoed faintly in her ears, but so too did another sound, the memory of her fist striking a practice pad, the power of her body in motion. One day soon, those echoes would meet, and when they did, Jefferson High would never laugh the same way again. Humility was not something Aaliyah wore like an accessory. It was stitched into her very being, a cloak she wrapped tightly around herself each day before stepping out into the world. To her classmates, it looked like quiet submission. To her uncle, it was discipline, an invisible armor forged in the fires of patience. At school, she kept her head bowed just enough to seem unthreatening, her voice soft enough to fade under the chatter of others. She smiled when necessary, nodded politely when someone addressed her, and never argued when teased. This mask of humility disarmed teachers, convinced them she was sweet but fragile. It lulled her peers into believing she was powerless, a background figure in their noisy world. But Aaliyah knew the truth. Humility wasn't weakness. It was choice. Every evening, the mask fell away the moment she entered the sanctuary of her uncle's dojo. The old wooden floor creaked under her bare feet, the air scented faintly of sandalwood and sweat. Here, she did not walk timidly, she flowed like water, her body alive with confidence. Her uncle, Malik, was a towering man with a voice like gravel softened by time. He had once competed across continents, his name whispered in martial arts circles with both respect and fear. But now, in his 50s, his energy was no longer spent on glory, it was invested in her. Again, he commanded, his deep tone echoing in the basement. Aaliyah shifted, feet spreading shoulder-width apart. She exhaled, focusing on the sound of the pad in his hand. With a swift, practiced movement, her fist cut through the air and struck the target. The sharp crack reverberated. "Better," Malik said. "But too much hesitation. You hear the sound before you trust it. Trust yourself first." She nodded, adjusting her stance. Strike after strike, kick after kick, the dojo came alive with the symphony of her training. Sweat trickled down her brow, but her movements remained precise, honed by years of repetition. In these walls, blindness meant nothing. Here, she was predator, not prey. After an hour, Malik lowered the pad. "Sit," he said. She obeyed, folding her legs beneath her. He sat opposite her, silent for a long time. Aaliyah knew these silences well, they were never empty. "Do you know why I push you so hard?" Malik asked finally. "Because I can do more," she replied softly. He grunted approval. "Yes. But more than that, you must learn control. You live in two worlds, Aaliyah. Out there," he gestured vaguely toward the school beyond their walls, "they see you as fragile. In here, you are a storm. If you forget your humility, your power will consume you. If you forget your power, the world will." His words sank deep. This balance was the reason she wore her mask each day. She could have shattered Tanya's arrogance with one well-placed strike, ended the laughter with the snap of a wrist, but that would prove nothing. Strength without discipline was chaos, and Aaliyah refused to be chaos. Later that night, lying on her bed, she thought about the events of the day. The laughter in the hallway, the shove that sent her cane clattering to the ground. She remembered the way her heart had raced, how her body had screamed to react. But she hadn't. Instead, she had stood, calm and composed, offering only one sharp remark before leaving the battlefield unscarred. That, too, was victory. The bullies mistook her silence for surrender, but in truth, it was strategy. Every insult, every humiliation, became another stone she quietly stacked into the fortress of her patience. One day, when the storm finally broke, it would not be out of anger. It would be justice. The following morning, she put on her mask again. She dressed with care, fingertips brushing over neatly folded clothes to ensure precision. Her braids were tied back, her shoes polished. As she tapped her cane against the pavement on her way to school, she listened to the world waking up, the hum of cars, the rustle of leaves, the chatter of children. Each sound was a reminder that she was not alone, no matter how isolating the hallways sometimes felt. Inside the school, the performance resumed. Tanya spotted her almost immediately, her voice rising above the noise. Well, if it isn't our favorite blind bat." Tanya sneered. A chorus of laughter followed. Aaliyah's lips curved into a faint smile, the kind that revealed nothing. She adjusted her grip on her cane and continued walking, her poise unshaken. "Hey, Aaliyah," Tanya called again. You sure you don't want me to guide you to class? I wouldn't want you to bump into a locker. Her friends howled, and Tanya basked in the attention. But Aaliyah kept moving, each step deliberate. To the casual eye, she looked unaffected. Inside, she catalogued every word, every laugh, storing them like kindling. Because humility was not ignorance. It was awareness sharpened to a blade. When she finally sat in her classroom, the mask of humility still firmly in place, Aaliyah allowed herself a small exhale. She was tired, yes, but not broken. Each day was another rehearsal, another lesson in restraint. What Tanya and her followers could never understand was that Aaliyah's silence was not weakness, it was strength disguised. Her humility was not surrender, it was strategy. And one day, when the mask finally slipped, the truth beneath it would astonish them all. The world outside saw her as delicate, but within the basement of her uncle's house, Aaliyah became something else entirely. The dojo was no grand hall, just a square room with scuffed wooden walls, faded mats, and the faint scent of incense clinging to the air. Yet to Aaliyah, it was a cathedral. Each creak of the floor, each shift of her breath, was a prayer to discipline and strength. Here, shadows did not intimidate her. Shadows were home. She entered barefoot, cane folded neatly by the door. The moment her feet touched the cool mat, she shed the weight of the day, the laughter, the cruel hands, the voices that tried to define her. In this place, her blindness was no burden. It was liberation. Her Uncle Malik stood waiting, his presence a mountain of calm. His footsteps, heavy yet controlled, were as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. Bow, he instructed. Aaliyah bent deeply, her braids sliding forward over her shoulder. This ritual was never skipped. Humility first. Always humility. The lesson began in silence. Malik moved across the mat, the faint hiss of his GI brushing against itself. Aaliyah followed, guided not by sight but by sound, by instinct. Her bare feet kissed the mat in patterns of balance, her hands lifted in practiced readiness. Listen, Malik said, his voice low and commanding. The world will not slow down for you. You must hear what others ignore. She nodded, tilting her head. Beyond his words, she caught the smallest sounds, the air shifting as his arm lifted, the slight crack of his knuckles as he flexed, the steady rhythm of his breath. These were signals, secrets the world whispered only to those who knew how to listen. Malik lunged without warning. Aaliyah pivoted, her body bending like water, his strike brushing past her shoulder. He attacked again, faster. Her instincts flared. She ducked, then spun, the edge of her foot striking the mat with controlled precision. She did not counter with full force, her uncle had taught her restraint, but the movement alone was sharp enough to draw a grunt of approval from him. Good, he said. Again. The dance continued, strike, block, pivot, counter. Aaliyah's body remembered what her eyes never could. Every bruise earned over the years, every fall, every mistake had built this muscle memory. Her arms were small but strong, her legs precise and unyielding. She had trained not to see, but to be. At last, Malik stepped back. Enough. Aaliyah stilled, chest rising and falling with steady breath. You know why they mock you? He asked, voice softer now. Because they think I'm weak, she answered. Exactly. Malik paused, the weight of his silence settling over the dojo. And they will keep thinking it, until you decide otherwise. But power must not be revealed out of pride. It must be revealed only when the heart demands it. She bowed her head, absorbing his words. There were whispers, of course. The neighbors had seen her entering the dojo, heard the thuds of training from behind thin walls. Some wondered aloud if the blind girl was really learning to fight. A few dismissed it as nothing more than exercise. Rumors flitted like moths in the dark, but no one knew the truth. Aaliyah herself was careful to keep it that way. To her classmates, she was still the quiet, blind girl who walked the halls with fragile grace. To Tanya and her clique, she was an easy target, a blank canvas for their cruelty. They could not imagine that after school, in this small basement, she became a warrior who could strike with the speed of lightning and the precision of a blade. And perhaps that was her greatest weapon, being underestimated. After training, Malik guided her to the corner where a small wooden bench sat. He placed a towel in her hand, and she wiped the sweat from her brow. "You are ready for more," he said at last. "But not just in body, in spirit. When the time comes, your spirit must be stronger than your fists." Aaliyah sat quietly, her fingers tracing the grain of the wooden bench. She thought of Tanya's laughter, of the shove in the hallway, of the countless times she had swallowed pain in silence. Each memory burned, but none consumed her. They were fuel, carefully banked. "I'll be ready," she whispered. Malik placed a hand on her shoulder, firm and grounding. "I know you will. But remember, your battle is not to prove them wrong. It is to prove yourself right." Those words lingered long after she left the dojo. That night, lying in bed, she replayed the training in her mind. The sound of Malik's strikes, the rhythm of her counters, the weight of his lessons. She also replayed the whispers, the cruel ones at school, the doubtful ones from neighbors. But over them all rose the whispers of the dojo, her uncle's voice, her own steady breath, the echo of her fist striking the pad. They told her she was not fragile. They told her she was not prey. They told her that her silence was not surrender, it was the calm before the storm. And though no one else yet knew it, those whispers would soon grow louder than any laughter the hallways could throw at her. The days at Jefferson High began to blend together, a rhythm of footsteps, whispers, and laughter that struck Aaliyah like a drumbeat she could not escape. But within that rhythm, the notes of cruelty were growing sharper, louder, impossible to ignore. Tanya's voice carried farther down the hall now, dripping with a confidence that fed on the attention of her peers. Every insult was bolder than the last, every shove more deliberate. The laughter that followed no longer came from just her inner circle, it had spread, like wildfire across dry grass. It was no longer enough for Tanya to mock. Now, she wanted to humiliate. That morning, Aaliyah sensed it before it happened. The hall buzzed unnaturally, a thick energy that clung to her skin like static. Her cane tapped steadily, her posture calm, but her ears picked up too much, the hushed whispers that stopped when she passed, the nervous giggles from students who usually stayed silent, the shifting footsteps of Tanya's crew as they lingered in wait. Aaliyah adjusted her grip on the cane. She didn't need sight to know she was walking into a trap. "Good morning, blind Barbie." Tanya's voice rang out, high and cruel. "Did you miss me?" The laughter erupted. Aaliyah kept walking, her steps steady. But then it came, the sharp tug on her backpack, sudden and forceful, nearly yanking her backward. She caught herself, breath sharp in her chest. Her cane clattered to the floor again, a metallic echo she was beginning to loathe. "Oops," Tanya said sweetly, feigning innocence. "Clumsy me." This time, the laughter was louder. Someone kicked her cane down the hallway, and another voice jeered, "Fetch, Aaliyah. Go on, find it." Her jaw tightened. She bent slowly, searching the floor with her hand, but before her fingers could find the cane, a sneaker pressed down hard on it, pinning it against the tile. "Looking for this?" Tanya taunted, her voice close, her breath hot with arrogance. The hallway roared with approval. Aaliyah froze, her hand hovering just inches from Tanya's shoe. Inside her chest, the storm stirred violently, her patience trembling against its walls. "Strike her now," a voice inside whispered. "One sweep of your arm, one twist of her wrist, and she'll crumble." But then her uncle's words echoed, "Control is your greatest weapon. Anger is theirs, not yours." Aaliyah drew in a breath, steadying herself. She lifted her chin slightly, her voice calm. "Enjoy it while you can, Tanya." For a moment, the laughter faltered, replaced by confusion. Then Tanya scoffed, shoving the cane back toward Aaliyah's hand. "You're pathetic," she sneered, before sauntering off. The hallway erupted again, but this time, there was a subtle difference. A few students didn't laugh. A few whispered instead, voices tinged with unease. Because they had felt it, too. A shift. It wasn't in her words alone, it was in the way Aaliyah stood, unshaken, her silence not like submission but like thunder waiting to crack the sky. That afternoon, Aaliyah sat in the dojo with Malik. The room was quiet except for the sound of her fists striking the pad he held. Each hit was harder than usual, fueled by the storm inside her. "Again," Malik said, bracing himself. She struck, the sharp crack echoing. "Again." The air in Jefferson High's main hallway felt different that morning. Heavier. Tighter. Like the school itself was holding its breath. Aaliyah sensed it with every step of her cane tapping against the floor. Her chest was calm, but beneath it, the storm rumbled, coiled and ready. She had endured long enough. Her uncle's words echoed in her mind, "A storm does not ask permission to come. It breaks when it must." At her locker, she adjusted the strap of her backpack, listening. The hall buzzed with chatter, footsteps, laughter, but beneath it all, she caught the sharper tones, Tanya's voice, shrill and arrogant, growing louder as she approached. "Blind Barbie," Tanya sang, her heels clicking against the tile. "Missed you yesterday. Where's your little white stick? Don't tell me you lost it again." Her friends cackled. Aaliyah's hand tightened around her cane. The shove came next, hard against her shoulder. Her body staggered, but her balance held. She exhaled slowly, grounding herself. Tanya wasn't finished. She yanked at Aaliyah's backpack, ripping it from her shoulders and tossing it to the floor. Papers scattered across the tiles like fallen feathers. Gasps rippled through the hallway. Phones came out, camera lenses flashing like vultures circling prey. Aaliyah stood still, her breathing steady, her hands loose at her sides. "Pick it up, Barbie," Tanya sneered. "Come on. Crawl for it. Show us how it's done." The laughter was cruel, but weaker this time, uncertain. The crowd had seen this show before, but something about Aaliyah's stillness, her silence, felt different. Aaliyah tilted her head slightly, her sightless eyes fixed in Tanya's direction. "Enough." Her voice wasn't loud. But it cut through the hallway like a blade. The laughter stuttered, faltered. Tanya blinked, thrown off for just a heartbeat. Then she smirked, trying to recover. "Or what?" she taunted, stepping closer, her hand reaching to shove again. That's when the storm broke. Aaliyah moved. Her hand snapped up, catching Tanya's wrist midair with a precision that seemed impossible for someone blind. Gasps erupted around them. In one fluid motion, she twisted, stepping aside, and Tanya stumbled forward, off balance. Aaliyah released her, the sound of Tanya's stumble echoing louder than a slap. The crowd roared, half in shock, half in awe. But Tanya, red-faced, recovered quickly. "You think you're tough," she spat, lunging forward. Aaliyah pivoted smoothly, her cane sweeping low. Tanya's feet tangled, and she went crashing to the floor with a cry, her knees and palms smacking against tile. The hallway erupted. Phones shot higher, capturing every second. Tanya scrambled up, furious, but Aaliyah was already standing tall, her posture calm, her face serene. "I don't want to hurt you," Aaliyah said evenly. "But I will defend myself." The words silenced the crowd completely. For the first time, Tanya's power, built on mockery and fear, cracked. Her friends hesitated, unsure, the bravado slipping from their faces. Tanya glanced at them, then back at Aaliyah, desperation replacing confidence. You're just a blind freak," she shouted, her voice breaking. She lunged again, wild this time. But wildness had no place against discipline. Aaliyah stepped aside, her body moving like water, redirecting Tanya's momentum with the lightest of touches. Tanya slammed into a locker door with a hollow clang. The crowd gasped, then burst into cheers. Not laughter, cheers. Phones caught every angle, the girl they had called Blind Barbie standing unshaken, her tormentor collapsing under her own rage. Aaliyah breathed deeply, her fists loose, her storm now spent. She hadn't struck in anger, she had only redirected. Her uncle's training, her patience, her strength, all had led to this moment. And she had not broken. She had risen. Tanya staggered back, clutching her arm, her pride shattered more than her body. Her eyes darted around at the crowd, desperate for support. But the cheers weren't for her anymore. They were for Aaliyah. "Pathetic," someone muttered from the crowd, not at Aaliyah, but at Tanya. Tanya froze. Her power was gone, crumbling in her hands. Aaliyah bent slowly, retrieving her backpack from the floor. Her cane tapped once, steady and sure. She straightened, facing the silent, breathless crowd. "I've been silent long enough," she said quietly, but her words carried, strong and unshakable. "No more." And with that, she walked down the hallway, her steps firm, her cane tapping like a drumbeat of victory. The crowd parted for her. Phones lowered. Whispers followed, not of mockery, but of awe. Behind her, Tanya stood trembling, surrounded by the very crowd that once cheered her cruelty. The queen had fallen, and everyone knew it. The storm had broken. And Jefferson High would never be the same. The video hit Jefferson High like a lightning strike. By lunch period, it had spread through every corner of the school. On screen, Aaliyah moved with the grace of someone who had been underestimated for too long. The blind girl who was supposed to stumble had instead turned the queen bee into a spectacle of clumsy rage. Phones passed from hand to hand, whispers trailing in their wake. "Did you see her catch Tanya's wrist? She didn't even look scared. That spin, like something out of a movie." By the time Aaliyah entered the cafeteria, her cane tapping steady and calm, the entire room hushed. No laughter this time. No cruel whispers. Only silence, thick and electric. Aaliyah paused, sensing it, her hand tightening on her tray. The silence was different from before, not mocking, but reverent. Curious. Unsure. She walked forward, each step deliberate. She could feel eyes tracking her, scanning her face, her posture, her every movement. Where once they had seen fragility, now they saw steel. At her usual corner table, she sat quietly. She ate slowly, calmly, ignoring the weight of the stairs. If they wanted to watch, let them. She had no mask left to wear. It was Tanya who broke first. Across the cafeteria, she entered flanked by her two closest friends. But the energy around her had shifted. The eyes that once looked at her with admiration now looked with hesitation. Fear. Even pity. She tried to laugh, tossing her hair as if nothing had changed. But her voice cracked under the weight of memory, the clang of her body against the lockers, the cheers that followed. Her friends, once eager shadows, exchanged uneasy glances. The confidence they had borrowed from her had dried up, leaving only uncertainty. When Tanya's gaze met Aaliyah's, blind eyes that somehow saw more than sight ever could, she looked away. Quickly. Too quickly. The cafeteria noticed. The hierarchy had shifted. Later that day, Aaliyah was summoned to the principal's office. She sat across from Mr. Holloway, the steady tick of the clock filling the silence. He folded his hands on the desk, his voice measured. "Aaliyah," he began, "I've reviewed the reports. And, the videos." Her heart thudded once, heavy but calm. "You defended yourself," he continued, his tone carrying both relief and unease. "You didn't strike first. You didn't escalate. But still, violence in the hallway," he sighed, leaning back in his chair. "It complicates things." Aaliyah lifted her chin. "I didn't want to hurt her. I just wanted it to stop." Mr. Holloway studied her face. What he saw there unsettled him, not defiance, not fear, but clarity. "Self-defense," he said finally, his tone softening. "Legally, ethically, it matters. You won't be punished. But understand, this changes how people see you. Some for better, some for worse." She nodded. "I know." He hesitated. "Do you practice martial arts?" Aaliyah smiled faintly. "I practice listening." The principal blinked, unsure how to respond. In the end, he only dismissed her with a weary nod. Word spread even faster after her meeting. Some called her a hero. Others whispered warnings, saying she was dangerous, unpredictable. Teachers looked at her differently, their tones shifting from pity to cautious respect. For Aaliyah, it was strange. The silence she had carried so long had shattered, but in its place came noise. Attention. Recognition. In the hallways, students she had never spoken to offered shy greetings. A boy from her math class carried her books once without being asked. A girl she barely knew whispered, "You were amazing," before darting away. And yet, there were also whispers dipped in venom. "She's violent. She tricked us all. What if she snaps again?" The storm had broken, but its thunder still rolled. That night, at the dojo, her Uncle Malik listened as she described the day. "They're looking at me differently," she said, her voice uncertain. "Some of them respect me. Some are afraid. I don't know what to do with it." Malik's chuckle was low and steady. "Power always changes the way people look at you. But remember, power is not about what they see. It's about what you choose to do." She exhaled, her shoulders softening. "I didn't want to be violent." "And you weren't," Malik replied. "You redirected. You defended. That is strength." That is control. If you had unleashed your anger, Tanya would not have walked away unbroken. You showed mercy. Aaliyah bowed her head, letting the words sink in. Mercy. The very thing no one had ever shown her in the hallways. Do you regret it? Malik asked gently. No, she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. I regret staying silent for so long. But not this. The next morning, whispers filled the air again, but they were different. Not cruel, not mocking. They carried weight. Anticipation. In homeroom, Tanya sat in the back, her eyes shadowed, her voice absent. Her friends kept their distance, their loyalty fractured. The queen had been dethroned, her crown stolen not by ridicule, but by truth. And though Aaliyah never sought the throne, the crown now hovered above her head all the same. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. For the first time, her silence was not mistaken for weakness, but recognized as strength. And for the first time, the world seemed to wait, not for her to fall, but for her to rise. Autumn sunlight streamed through the windows of Jefferson High, spilling golden warmth across the polished floors. For the first time in years, Aaliyah walked through those halls not as prey, not as shadow, but as presence. Her cane tapped its steady rhythm, click, pause, a song of certainty. Each strike was not just navigation, but declaration, I am here. I am whole. I am unbroken. Students parted for her now. Not out of fear, but out of recognition. The video had traveled beyond Jefferson High, spreading across neighboring schools, then across the city. The blind girl who had endured cruelty with quiet dignity had finally revealed the storm that lived inside her. But more important than the storm was what followed, calm. She hadn't become another bully. She hadn't sought revenge. She had simply drawn a line and stood on it. And in that quiet defiance, she had taught them all something far greater than dominance. One afternoon, she was invited to speak in the gymnasium. Rows of bleachers filled with restless students, their voices echoing against the high ceilings. The same gym that once hosted pep rallies and basketball games now waited for the blind girl they had once mocked. Aaliyah stood at center court, the microphone cool in her hand. She breathed deeply, her fingers brushing the smooth wood floor beneath her shoes. She could hear every fidget, every cough, every heartbeat of the crowd. She didn't need to see their faces. She already knew the weight of their eyes. When I first came here, she began, her voice steady, I thought my silence was protection. I thought if I kept my head down, if I endured quietly, it would pass. But silence doesn't protect you. It only teaches others how to treat you. A hush fell deeper over the crowd. I was mocked because I was blind. Pushed, shoved, humiliated. And I let it happen. Not because I was weak, but because I wanted peace. But peace without respect is just another name for fear. She paused, listening. As the air itself leaned closer. I didn't fight back with fists. I didn't strike in anger. I defended myself, and in that moment, I discovered something. Strength is not measured in how loud you roar, but in how deeply you stand your ground. Somewhere in the bleachers, a voice whispered, wow, barely audible, but the word rippled through the crowd. I'm not here to tell you to fight. I'm here to tell you to rise. Whether you are mocked for your blindness, your weight, your accent, your skin, whatever it may be, you are more than their laughter. You are more than their cruelty. Your silence is not your sentence. It is your choice. And when you choose to break it, you change everything. A beat of silence. Then applause, soft at first, then swelling like thunder, rolling across the gym. Aaliyah bowed her head. She hadn't spoken for praise. She had spoken because it was time. In the weeks that followed, her world changed in ways she hadn't imagined. The principal invited her to help with a new initiative, peer mentoring for students facing bullying. Younger students sought her out quietly, confiding their stories, their fears. They didn't see a fragile blind girl anymore. They saw a warrior cloaked in humility. Even Tanya changed. The once reigning queen of cruelty now sat quietly in classes, her arrogance hollowed out. She avoided Aaliyah at first, shame burning hotter than pride. But one day, in the cafeteria, Tanya approached. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "I'm sorry." Aaliyah tilted her head, listening to the sincerity hidden under the brokenness. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply nodded. "Learn from it," she said softly. And in that moment, the cycle broke. At the dojo, Malik watched her progress with pride. One evening, after an especially grueling session, he placed a folded black belt in her hands. "You've earned this," he said. Aaliyah's fingers trembled as they traced the fabric. Not because of what it symbolized in martial arts, but because of what it meant for her journey. The belt was not just mastery of technique. It was mastery of self. She tied it around her waist slowly, deliberately. It fit not like a prize, but like an identity finally claimed. "Uncle," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "I used to think my blindness was my weakness. And now?" Malik asked, his tone gentle. "Now I know, it taught me to see in ways others cannot. To listen deeper. To feel more. To fight not for pride, but for purpose." Malik smiled, the lines of his face softening. "Then you understand the true legacy of the black belt. It is not about defeating others. It is about becoming yourself." Months later, Aaliyah stood outside the school at sunset, the sky painted with streaks of fire and violet. She tilted her face upward, the warmth brushing her skin. She heard laughter nearby, not cruel, not mocking, but genuine. For the first time in years, the sound didn't tighten her chest. It lifted it. She walked forward, her cane tapping with rhythm, her black belt tied firmly beneath her jacket. She was no longer just the blind girl. She was no longer just the bullied girl. She was no longer just silence. She was the lesson. The warning. The hope. And in her steps echoed a legacy that would ripple far beyond Jefferson High. Because the true legacy of the black belt was never in the color of the fabric. It was in the invisible strength woven through it, the courage to endure, the wisdom to act, and the humility to inspire. And Aaliyah carried that legacy now, not just around her waist, but in every breath, every word, every silence she chose to break.